My name is Laura. I am 34 and a single mom, and I learned the hard way that in my family the word family is just another way to say control. On Christmas Eve, I was standing in my parents' living room, watching my son hover near the dessert table in his little sweater, cheeks pink from running around the house. My mom picked up the last slice of Christmas pudding, looked straight at him, then turned to the room and said, "Only family gets to eat." She laughed. My sister's kids giggled with their plates already loaded with seconds, and everyone went right back to talking as if my child had not just been told he did not belong. My son swallowed, forced a smile, and whispered that he was not hungry anyway. I could see his eyes shine, and in that moment something in me snapped into place. I did not throw a scene, I did not shout or flip the table. I just took a slow breath, walked over, and told him to grab his coat. While my mom called after us asking where we were going, I said we had everything we needed at home and closed the door on the smell of dinner and the sound of their laughter. I honestly thought that was going to be the worst part of the night. The very next morning, my phone lit up with 33 missed calls from my mom and one panicked voicemail about how they were sealing everything and how I needed to call her back right now. I stared at the screen for a long time, felt years of guilt and obligation finally burn off, and when I did answer, all I said was, "Shh, we are not family." If you have ever watched someone swing the word family around like a weapon instead of a promise, stay with me, because that one slice of dessert was just the beginning of how my parents lost their money, their image, and both of their children. That night, after I shut the door on my parents' perfect Christmas, I drove home in tight, angry silence while my son stared out the window. His name is Noah, he is 10, and he kept tracing little circles in the fog on the glass like he was trying not to cry. When we walked into our small Chicago townhouse, I hung up our coats, forced my voice to sound normal, and told him we were going to make our own dessert. I warmed milk, stirred in cocoa, sprayed the last of a can of whipped cream, and handed him a mug of hot chocolate while he curled up on the couch. I put on one of those corny Christmas movies on Netflix, the kind where everyone forgives each other for years of damage in the last 5 minutes. Halfway through, Noah said, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I paused the movie and sat next to him. "No," I said, "you did everything right. What your grandmother said tonight was wrong, not you." He stared at his mug. "She said only family gets dessert. Are we not family?" My chest hurt. "We are," I told him. "And one day you will understand that sharing a last name does not give anyone the right to decide who matters. For now, I just need you to know none of this is your fault." He nodded, but I could see the way he tucked the hurt away like kids do when they realize adults are not going to fix it. When he finally fell asleep on the couch, I carried him to bed, tucked him in, and then just sat in the hallway in the dark. I had spent years swallowing moments like this when they were aimed at me. Watching them humiliate my kid flipped a switch I did not know was still there. The next morning, my alarm went off at 7. For a few seconds, I forgot about the party. Then I grabbed my phone and saw it. 33 missed calls from Mom and one new voicemail. I made coffee, hit play, and listened to her voice. "Laura, you need to call me back. They are sealing everything. The lawyer says, if we do not move fast, we could lose the house and the retirement. You cannot just ignore this. You are part of this family, whether you like it or not." That was it. Not a single word about Noah or dessert, or the way she told my son to his face that he was not family. Just pure panic about money and assets and whatever she meant by sealing everything. I stood barefoot on the cold kitchen tile and thought about how many times my parents had dressed control up as concern. After my divorce, my dad once suggested putting his name on the deed to my place, just to help with the mortgage, he said, so things would be simpler for the family. I told him no, and he acted like I had personally attacked him. Ever since then, money and property have been his favorite weapons. Now here we were again. Except this time, the thing he seemed terrified of losing was tied to my name. I did not call my mom back. I texted instead. You made it clear last night that my son and I are not family. Handle your house and your retirement with your lawyer. Then I blocked her number, not forever, just long enough to stop the constant buzzing and hear my own thoughts. About an hour later, my phone lit up with a different name. Chris, my older brother. He almost never called unless our parents were in the room. I answered anyway. What the hell happened last night? He asked. Mom is freaking out. Dad is pacing around talking about lawyers and ungrateful children. I told him what happened at the dessert table and what she said to Noah. On the other end of the line, he went quiet. I saw him standing there. He said finally. I told myself I was overreacting, that Mom was just stressed. I guess I did what I always do. I let it go. Of course he did. Chris has spent his whole life smoothing things over, pretending their worst moments were no big deal. I am not asking you to fix them, I said. I am just done letting them use the word family as leverage. They want my name on their paperwork and their trust and their house, but they cannot even give my kid a slice of pudding. If we are not family at the table, we are not family at the bank. There was a long pause, and then he said something I did not expect. Okay. Tell me what you want me to do. And that was the moment this stopped being about dessert and started being about their precious legacy. When I blocked my mom's number, I honestly thought I might get a day or two of peace before the next wave of drama, but I forgot one important thing about my parents. They love an audience. A few hours after I talked to Chris, I was scrolling through Facebook while Noah played video games in the living room, and there it was, a brand new post from my mom at the top of my feed. A picture of my parents' living room, the Christmas tree glowing, the table full of food. My sister standing there with her kids in their matching pajamas, everyone smiling like an advertisement for the perfect suburban holiday. The caption said, "Feeling so blessed for family this year. Nothing matters more." My stomach turned. I zoomed in on the photo out of habit, looking for myself, looking for Noah, even though I already knew. We were not there. The angle made it obvious that the picture had been taken after we left, like they had literally framed us out of their narrative. I stared at the words "so blessed for family" and heard her voice from the night before. Only family gets to eat. My notifications pinged again, this time a text from my sister. Why did you bail last night? Mom said Noah was being difficult. I sat there for a second, choosing my words very carefully. You saw what happened with the dessert, I typed back. She looked at my kid and told him only family gets to eat, and then gave your kid seconds. There was a pause. The typing dots popped up, disappeared, popped up again. Finally, she replied, "You are being dramatic. It was a joke. You know how Mom is. You cannot blow up the whole family over one awkward comment." That was the thing. To Emily, it was always one comment, one joke, one moment, never a pattern. I stared at the message and realized we were not having the same conversation. She had grown up as the golden child, the one they bragged about at dinner parties, the one who could screw up and still get rescued. I had grown up as the example of what not to be. I did not bother arguing. I just replied, if it was a joke, it was at my son's expense, and I am done letting them laugh. Then I set my phone down and pulled out an old notebook from the kitchen drawer, the one I used to write grocery lists and half-finished resolutions in. On the first clean page, I wrote a date, and then I started listing every time I could remember my parents choosing a favorite or using money to pull the strings. The time they skipped Noah's birthday party to take my sister and her kids on a trip to the lake house. The time they told me I should be grateful they watched Noah for a weekend and then turned around and held it over my head when I would not co-sign a loan. The time my dad suggested again that it would be easier if the house was in his name, for taxes, for the family, for our future. Seeing it all in black ink made me feel less crazy. It was not one dessert. It was a lifetime of being told I was too independent, too emotional, too much, and now my 10-year-old was getting handed the same script. When Chris texted me later that afternoon, he suggested we meet in person, someplace neutral. We picked a small coffee shop a few blocks from my place, the kind with fogged-up windows and people working on laptops. He was already there when I walked in, a half-finished coffee in front of him, fingers drumming on the table. "You look like hell," he said quietly when I sat down. I laughed once because, coming from him, that was almost concern. "Welcome to the dark side," I said. I told him about the Facebook post, about the caption, about how Noah and I had been erased from the picture like we were never there. He shook his head slowly. "I saw Mom post it," he admitted. "I did not realize you were not in the photo until you said it out loud." "That is how deep this goes," I said. "They can cut us out and still tell themselves they are good people." Chris leaned back and rubbed his face. He told me then what he had found out from talking to our parents' lawyer, that there was a family trust and a little web of LLCs wrapped around the lake house in Michigan and some other assets, and that my name was still on one of the deeds as a co-owner from years ago when I helped pay for repairs. Suddenly, that phrase "sealing everything" made a lot more sense. Dad called the lawyer after Christmas, Chris said. He wanted to move some things around, make sure certain people were protected. His words, not mine. The lawyer told him he could not just shuffle assets without notifying all the owners, so they might have to temporarily freeze or seal the paperwork until they heard from you. Hence, 33 missed calls, I said. They were not worried about losing me. They were worried about losing access to my signature. Chris nodded, looking a little sick. "They always figured you would never actually walk away," he said. "You have always been the one paying your own bills, raising your own kid. They never thought you would touch the trust. They thought they had me and Emily on the hook, and you would just hover on the outside forever." I stirred my coffee and said, "I am not asking to steal anything from them. I just do not want my name used as their safety net when they cannot even show basic respect to my child. I want whatever part is legally mine to be walled off from their games, so it goes to Noah someday without strings attached." Chris stared at the table for a long time. Finally, he looked up and said, "I can talk to a different lawyer. Not theirs, someone who works for us. We can find out exactly what your options are, what my options are. But you need to understand, if we do this, there is no pretending things are normal after." I thought about Noah standing at that dessert table, about his small voice asking if we were not family. Then I thought about my mom's voicemail, full of panic for her retirement, and not one word for my son. "Good," I said. Normal was killing me slowly. 2 days after that coffee shop meeting with Chris, I got the kind of email that makes your stomach knot before you even finish the first sentence. The subject line said, "Family Trust Concerns," with my parents' lawyer's name underneath. The tone was exactly what I expected, formal and condescending at the same time. It started with, "Dear Laura, your parents have informed me that you may be considering changes to your participation in the family trust and related property interests," and slid straight into a paragraph about potential tax penalties, complications with long-term planning, and how sudden moves could jeopardize your parents' retirement. There were sentences like, "It would be in the best interest of the family if you refrained from making any hasty decisions," and "Your parents have always had your financial security at heart." Reading it, you would think I was an ungrateful teenager, not the person who had been paying her own bills and raising a kid alone for a decade. I read it twice, then forwarded it to the independent lawyer Chris had found, along with a simple line, "Is any of this actually about taxes, or is it just pressure?" While I waited for a response, I just stood in my kitchen and let the pattern play out in my head. My parents only learned the word boundaries in therapy after my dad's affair years ago, and even then they used it like a weapon, not a practice. They loved the idea of legacy, of a story where they had sacrificed everything for their kids. But in reality, most of their sacrifices were strings dressed up as gifts. When the new lawyer called me back, he was blunt. Some of what the email said was technically true, he explained, but very incomplete. Yes, restructuring a trust and moving property around can have tax consequences, but any decent planner would have talked to me directly about options, not tried to scare me into silence through my parents' mouthpiece. He confirmed what Chris had already told me, that my name on the deed for the Lake House LLC meant nothing significant could happen with that cabin without my consent, and that the firm was obligated to loop me in. When he said, "Frankly, if they are this desperate to keep you from asking questions, you should definitely be asking questions," something inside me relaxed. I was not crazy. I was just inconvenient to people who were used to getting their way. With his help, I drafted my own email, this time not as the scared daughter but as a co-owner and beneficiary. I wrote, "I am fully aware of my legal interest in the Michigan property and any related entities. I do not consent to any sale, lease, refinance, or restructuring of these assets without my explicit written approval. I also request a full accounting of all transactions related to the property and trust for the last 5 years, sent directly to me. From this point forward, all communication regarding my interest should go through me or my counsel, not through my parents." It felt strange to see those words on the screen, like I was impersonating someone powerful, but the truth was I had always had that power. I had just been trained not to use it. I hit send and went back to loading the dishwasher like it was any other Tuesday. It took less than an hour for my mom to find another way to reach me. Blocking her main number had slowed her down, not stopped her. This time it was a voicemail from the house phone, the one they still kept on the wall like it was 1995. Her voice came through sounding shrill and wet, like she had been crying or wanted me to think she had. "Laura, what are you doing?" she snapped. "Your father is beside himself. The lawyer says you are making everything complicated. Do you have any idea what you are risking?" Then her tone shifted, and the mask slipped just a little. "That cabin is our retirement," she said. "We put our whole lives into giving you kids something to fall back on, and this is how you repay us, by freezing everything because your son had to hear no one time." My jaw clenched. She did not say his name once. She did not say, "I am sorry I humiliated your child." She said, "Your son had to hear no one time," like she had made him go to bed without a story, not told him he was not family in front of a room full of people. And then she said the part that really burned, "He needs to learn respect, Laura. You are too soft with him. This is why we have to be hard sometimes, so he does not turn out like you." I replayed that line twice just to make sure I had heard it right. In her mind, making sure he did not turn out like me meant making sure he learned his place in their hierarchy early. I texted the voicemail transcript to Chris without comment. A minute later he called, and I could hear the anger in his voice before he said anything. "She really said that?" he asked. "She really turned this into a lesson about respect?" I told him yes, and added, "She only started panicking when she thought she might lose the cabin, not when she realized she had hurt her grandson." There was a long exhale on the other end. "I am done going over there for a while," he said finally. "I cannot keep pretending this is normal. They called me twice this morning to complain about you, and not once to ask how Noah is." "Good," I replied. "Let them sit with themselves for a bit." A few hours later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Emily. "So now you are dragging lawyers into this," she wrote, over dessert. "You are punishing Mom and Dad for trying to build something for us. Just admit you are jealous they trusted me to handle things." I stared at her words and realized she really believed that. In her world, being the chosen one meant responsibility and favor, not chains. In mine, it meant my son being told he did not count. I typed back, "I am not jealous of being the favorite, Em. I am tired of being the backup. They only called me when their money got touched, not when they broke my kid's heart. I am not the one turning family into a transaction. I am just done being the collateral. Then I put my phone face down, because for the first time in my life, I was not waiting for their approval, their version of the story, or their permission to protect myself. About a week after that voicemail about the cabin and the retirement, just when I thought my parents might finally be running out of ways to reach me, they did exactly what I should have expected. They took it to social media. I was half watching Noah do homework at the kitchen table when a notification popped up from Facebook, an event invite from my mom. The title hit me first: Holiday Family Reconciliation Dinner, little snowflake emojis sprinkled around it like sugar. The description said something like, "After a hard year, we believe in forgiveness and second chances. There is nothing more important than family coming back together." She had posted a photo along with it, our parents' house lit up like a Christmas card, the tree glowing in the front window, a wreath on the door. The guest list was public enough for me to see: neighbors, church friends, my sister, her kids, a few of my parents' wine night couples, and of course, my brother Chris. There was one name missing: mine. I scrolled down and saw comments already rolling in. People wrote things like, "So beautiful, you two are such an inspiration," and "Love how your family always sticks together." I could practically hear my mom soaking up every heart emoji. A second later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a screenshot of the event from Chris. Underneath, he had typed, "You seeing this?" I replied, "Apparently, I have been invited to reconcile, just not tagged." He wrote back, "They called me twice this morning about it. They are acting like they are the victims in all this. Do you want to go?" I stared at that question for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore the whole thing, let them perform their little redemption arc without me. But another part of me, the part that watched them rewrite history in real time for decades, knew exactly what would happen if I stayed home. They would stand in front of that group and talk about their difficult daughter who turned her back on them. They would cry about how they tried so hard, and no one would ever hear the part where they told a 10-year-old he was not family. If we do not show up, they control the story. I finally typed, "If we do, at least we get to tell the truth." Chris sent back one word: "Okay." On the night of the dinner, I left Noah with a trusted babysitter from down the street. There was no way I was walking him back into that house. As I drove to my parents' place, the neighborhood looked like something out of a catalog. Lights on the houses, inflatable snowmen on the lawns, cars lining the street outside my childhood home. From the driveway, I could hear laughter and Christmas music spilling out into the cold air. Inside, the living room was full. Neighbors holding glasses of wine, church friends balancing plates of food. My sister standing near the tree in a new dress while her kids ran circles around the coffee table. My mom spotted me in the doorway, and for a split second, real surprise crossed her face. Then she pasted on a bright smile and came toward me with her arms open like this was all normal. "You made it," she said loudly, just enough for a few people to hear. "I knew you would not stay mad forever." I did not hug her back. Chris appeared at my side like a buffer, and I could tell from the tightness in his jaw that he was holding something in. My dad clinked his fork against a glass a few minutes later, calling for attention. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We know this has been a challenging year, and we are just so grateful to have our family and friends under one roof." My mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, already playing her role. "Family means everything to us," she added. "And sometimes there are misunderstandings, but at the end of the day, blood is blood." I felt my shoulders tense. There it was again, the magic word they loved to hide behind: blood. Chris shot me a quick look, the kind that says, "It is now or never." He stepped forward slightly and raised his voice just enough to cut through the polite applause. "Funny," he said, Because last week you looked your 10-year-old grandson in the eye and told him only family gets to eat. The room went silent so fast it was almost funny. Every head turned toward us. My mom froze, her hand still halfway to her face. My dad's smile dropped a fraction of an inch. Chris did not back down. He spoke calmly, like he was explaining a situation at work, not detonating a bomb in our parents' living room. Mom took the last slice of dessert at Christmas and told Laura's kid he was not family, he said. Then you let my sister's kids have seconds while he stood there pretending it did not hurt. And when Laura walked out with her son, the next morning you called her 33 times, not to apologize, but because the lawyer told you you might lose access to the cabin and the trust if she did not sign what you wanted. Someone near the sofa shifted, a neighbor couple who had known us since we were kids. The woman's eyebrows shot up, her mouth flat. My mom found her voice first. "Chris," she said, her tone sharp. "This is not appropriate. We can talk about family matters in private. This is not the place." He laughed once, no humor in it. "Private is what got us here," he said. "You get to humiliate people in private and then show this house off like we are some kind of perfect Christmas postcard." One of our neighbors, Mrs. Reynolds from across the street, spoke up before my parents could. "I was there that night," she said quietly. "I heard what you told Noah." A few more heads turned her way. "That is not a misunderstanding," she added. "That is cruel." My mom's face went red. She reached for the nearest excuse. "I was joking," she insisted. "You all know my sense of humor. These kids are too sensitive these days. I would never really mean that." She turned to me with a tremble in her voice. "Tell them, Laura. Tell them you know I did not mean it." Every eye in the room landed on me. For a second, I could feel 16-year-old me wanting to shrink, to smooth it over, to laugh and say, "It is fine, Mom. We know you did not mean it." But then I saw Noah in my mind, standing at that dessert table, and the words came out different this time. "No," I said, clear and calm. "You meant it. You have been meaning it my entire life. You meant it when you skipped his birthday to go to the lake house with Emily. You meant it when you told people he is not really like the other grandkids because he does not spend every summer at your place. All you did at Christmas was finally say it out loud." My dad slammed his glass down on the counter a little too hard. "We built all of this for you ungrateful children," he snapped. "This house, that cabin, the trust, the retirement, everything we have is for you, and this is how you repay us, by dragging our name through the mud in front of our friends." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You did not build this for us. You built it for control. You only called me when the lawyer told you my name was in the way. You didn't call once to ask how Noah was after you humiliated him. That is not love. That is leverage." The room was so quiet I could hear the heating system come on. Behind us, someone set their wine glass down carefully on a coaster, like they were afraid any noise would make things worse. My mom looked around at the faces she had handpicked for this performance and realized, maybe for the first time, that she was not winning them over. Her eyes filled, but the crying came out sharp, almost angry. "You are destroying our family," she said, voice cracking. "You are ruining our legacy, everything we worked for, all because your child had to hear no for once." I felt weirdly calm. "You destroyed it yourself," I said. "The second you decided a 10-year-old was expendable so you could protect your pride and your assets. We are just finally saying it where other people can hear." For a second nobody moved. Then Chris put his hand on my shoulder. "We are done here," he said quietly. We turned and walked to the door while our parents stood rooted to the spot in the center of their perfect decorated living room, with a room full of witnesses watching them, not with admiration this time, but with something closer to doubt. By the time I got home that night, the neighborhood group chat was already buzzing, screenshots of my mom's reconciliation post sitting right next to messages like, I did not know they treated their grandson like that, and that was hard to watch. My parents had finally gotten the audience they wanted. They just did not get the script they were expecting. A few days after the disaster reconciliation dinner, the house finally went quiet again. At least on the surface. No calls, no messages, just this strange, heavy pause like the moment right after a storm when you are not sure if there is another wave coming. I used that silence to finish what I had started with the lawyer Chris and I had hired. He sent me a detailed summary of the trust and the LLCs wrapped around the Michigan cabin, and for the first time in my life I saw my name on paper the way my parents saw it, not as an inconvenience, but as a key. The paperwork made it very clear nothing meaningful could happen with that property without the consent of every owner, which included me. With his guidance, I signed documents that formally separated my interest from anything my parents could control day to day. My share of the cabin and any related income was locked to me and, eventually, to Noah. Any refinance, sale, or new loan they wanted would require my explicit written approval. The lawyer was calm and matter-of-fact about it. "You are not taking anything that is not already yours," he said. "You are just making sure no one can use your name in a way you do not agree with." Chris went a step further. As a beneficiary on parts of the trust my parents had always assumed would be their backup cash flow, he elected to delay or limit future distributions that would go directly to them. Nothing illegal, nothing vindictive on paper, just sober choices that made it impossible for them to keep living like there would always be another check coming for every new toy or party. When the dust settled, the numbers told a story my parents had never imagined. The cabin was no longer an easy ATM, and the trust was no longer a lever they could pull to jerk us back in line. Word of what we had done must have reached them fast, because the next move they made was not an email or a post. It was a knock on my front door late on a gray Saturday afternoon. I checked the peephole and saw them on my stoop, my dad holding a Christmas tin of cookies like a prop, my mom clutching a folded tissue in one hand, her eyes already red. For a second my stomach flipped the way it always did before a fight, but then I remembered the Christmas party, the dessert table, the look on Noah's face, and the feeling went flat. I opened the door just enough to stand in it. Mom launched in first. "We need to talk," she said, her voice soft and shaky, not the shrill edge from the voicemails. "We cannot let lawyers come between us. This has gone too far." Dad nodded like a man who had rehearsed his lines. "Family does not take family to court," he added. "Family works things out in private, face to face." I almost laughed at that. "I have not taken anyone to court," I said. "I just stopped letting you make decisions with my name behind my back. You called the lawyer before you ever called to ask how your grandson was doing. That is what came between us." My mom stepped closer like she was going to reach for my hand. "We were upset," she said. "We were scared. Your father worked his whole life for that house and that cabin. We were just trying to secure our retirement and something for you kids." "You mean something for the kids who play along?" I said. "The ones who do not say no." Dad's jaw tightened. "You are throwing away your inheritance over a misunderstanding," he said, "over one bad joke and a slice of dessert. This is childish, Laura." I felt something in me go very still. "This is not about a slice of dessert," I said quietly. "This is about every time you chose control over kindness and then called it love, every time you dangled money over our heads and called it sacrifice. Christmas was just the first time you said the quiet part out loud in front of my child." Mom's eyes flashed, the tears shifting from sad to angry. "You will regret this when we are gone," she said. "One day you will wish you had not poisoned your brother against us or taken our future away." I shook my head. "Chris is a grown man who finally opened his eyes," I said. "I did not take your future. I just stopped letting you finance it with my son's dignity. You keep talking about your legacy like it is something on paper. The only legacy I care about is the one Noah carries, and I refuse to let him learn that love means accepting whatever people do to you as long as they share your DNA. My dad lifted the cookie tin like it was some kind of peace offering. "Can we at least come inside and talk to him?" he asked. "He is our grandson." My hand tightened on the edge of the door. "He is my son," I answered. "And until you can look him in the eye and apologize without excuses, you do not get access to him, or to my life, or to my signature. Right now, you are not safe for him, and that matters more to me than any house, any cabin, any trust." My mom's face crumpled at the word unsafe, like I had accused her of something unforgivable. But she still did not say the one thing that might have mattered. "I am sorry for what I said to Noah." She just kept circling back to how much they had given, how hard they had worked, how unfair it was that we were cutting them off. I finally felt the conversation hit the same wall it always hit, the place where they would rather feel wronged than be accountable. I took a breath. "I am not doing this anymore," I said. "You do not get to hurt my child and then hide behind the word legacy. You are not my legacy. You are my lesson, and I am done repeating it." Before they could answer, I stepped back just enough to be clear and closed the door. I stood there with my hand on the knob, listening to the muffled sound of my mom crying and my dad muttering something about ungrateful kids on the other side. Eventually, their footsteps faded down the stairs and the car door slammed and the engine started. Inside my house, it was quiet. No ringing phone, no pounding on the door, just the sound of Noah in his room humming to himself while he built something out of plastic bricks. Completely unaware that outside his world, the people who had taken dessert away from him were finally learning what it felt like to be left with nothing they could control. In the weeks after I closed the door on my parents, nothing dramatic happened, and that was the strangest part. No more voicemails about lawyers, no Facebook essays about forgiveness, no group texts trying to guilt me into coming over. It was just quiet. For the first time in my life, my phone could sit on the counter all day without turning into a grenade. At first, the silence felt wrong, like I should be doing something, reaching out, fixing it, playing the role I had always played, the one where I swallowed my pride so everyone else could stay comfortable. But every time that old instinct kicked in, I pictured Noah at that dessert table, and it snapped me right back. A few days after the door scene, Chris came over with pizza and a couple of those cheap Christmas movies on streaming. He walked in like he had been holding his breath for years and was finally allowed to exhale. Noah lit up when he saw him, dragged him to the living room to show off his latest Lego creation that he decided was the Michigan cabin, except, in his version, there was a huge sign on top that said, "No mean people allowed." Chris laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes, and I realized I could not remember the last time I had seen my brother laugh without glancing over his shoulder to see who was watching. We ate on the couch, sauce on paper plates, soda cans sweating on the coffee table. No crystal glasses, no fancy napkins folded into shapes, nobody grading our performance as a family. At one point in the movie, a character gave this big speech about how family is everything, and Noah turned to me and asked, "Does that mean you have to stay even when they are mean?" I muted the TV and told him the truth, the kind nobody ever told me when I was his age. "No," I said. "Family is supposed to be the people who make you feel safe and loved, not the people who tell you your place. Sometimes those are the same people you share DNA with, and sometimes they are not. Real family is who shows up when it counts, who listens, who apologizes when they are wrong. Blood alone does not earn them a permanent pass to hurt you." He thought about that for a second and then nodded, like I had just handed him a new rule book that actually made sense. Later that night, After Chris left and Noah was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and thought about everything my parents used to talk about when they said the word legacy. They meant houses and cabins and accounts, and a story where they were the heroes who sacrificed so much for their ungrateful children. The funny thing is, the minute their money stopped moving the way they wanted, their version of love vanished with it. They had spent years telling me that walking away would make me selfish and cold. Instead, what I found on the other side of that door was warmth. Just not the kind that comes from a big crowded house and a perfect tree. It was the warmth of being able to look at my kid and know I had finally chosen him and myself over their approval. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that my parents' social calendar got a lot lighter after that dinner. A couple of their closest friends still came around, the ones who believed their version of things, but a lot of people quietly stopped showing up. The cabin sat mostly empty that winter, not because they could not go, but because it was no longer a stage where they could parade the grandkids they thought counted. They still had their house, their things, their carefully arranged photos on the wall, but the audience they had built their identity around was smaller. And for the first time in their lives, they had to sit in the quiet and look at what they had actually raised. I do not know if they ever will. Maybe someday they will figure out how to say, "I am sorry," without adding, "but" right after. Maybe they will not. That part is not my responsibility anymore. What is my responsibility is the little boy sleeping down the hall and the lesson he learns from all of this. I want him to grow up knowing that love without respect is not love, that you are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if the world tells you family is everything, and that protecting your peace is not selfish, it is survival. I did not burn my family to the ground, I just stopped standing in the fire and calling it home. And if any of this sounds familiar to you, if you have ever been told to keep the peace while someone chipped away at your dignity, even in the name of family, I hope you hear this clearly. You are not crazy, and you are not alone. Have you ever had to cut off someone toxic, even if they shared your last name? And how did you know it was finally time to walk away?